Hey everyone, this is a supplemental video on the Avid Titler Plus tool. There is a fantastic introduction to this that walks you through the whole thing. It's put out by Avid and I've linked to that video on Canvas. So definitely watch that first. That tells you how to do all the basic things you would want to do. The one downside is that video is designed for professionals who have been editing in Avid for a long time, so it just goes through some of the things very quickly. So I'm offering this as a supplement to it. I'm not going to go through everything that they did, but we'll walk through a couple of the basics at a little slower pace and also show you a couple of common pitfalls or things you might run into when you're using this for your first or second time. So I've got my timeline here for a sequence, and let's say I want to put a title in here at the beginning of it. Now there are a couple of ways I can get to the Titler Plus tool. I can go under my Tools menu to Avid Titler Plus here. I can go to it in my menu bar on the timeline window right here. Or if I go to my effect palette and go to title, you'll see it's available there as an effect. These all take you to the same place. I think this is the most convenient, and it's also something you can map to your keyboard if you would like to just put a titler button for it. Mine is Shift T, takes me to the titler tool. So I'm just going to click on this. And as you saw in the video, it's going to bring up this Avid Titler Plus window with all my basic controls for the Titler Plus tool. It also brings up this other window over here. I'm not going to focus on that right now. There's going to be a later video where we talk about effects, and this becomes very important. This is called the effect editor, as you can see here. And notice it has a lot of the same controls that this has, just organized a little differently. And if I pull this out, it has some keyframing ability that we'll talk about later when we talk about effects. But for now, I'm just going to ignore that and work over here. So I'm going to select DT for titling, and a box comes up, and I can just type something in it. If I double click on one of these, it will select that word. If I triple click, it selects the whole thing as he goes through in the video. And so then if I want to change things about this, I could click here and change the color. I could change the size. So if I want it to be bigger, let's go up to 180. And I will note on my particular installation that actually sort of scrolling the size live does not work. So if I'm trying to sort of move left and right, it doesn't. I can definitely type things in here and change it. So if I want the letters further apart, I could increase the kerning. I'm just noting that the Titler Plus is actually a fairly new application. As he mentioned in the video, there was a very long-standing tool in Avid called the Title Tool application, which has been in existence for decades, and they finally kind of redesigned it to take advantage of some newer interfaces and the ability to do things in higher resolution. But the Titler Plus, to be blunt, is still kind of buggy. So I hope in your installation, if your version is slightly newer than mine, you might get these actually working. They don't work for me, but I can always click in here and type them. So if I want this to be, partially transparent, I could do that. And if I want to make another piece of text, we're going to click on the title itself. That one yellow. And you'll see I can also use these boxes to adjust them, and it's actually stretching the text as it goes within there. So I have all my usual sort of text controls here, and you can play with it, around with all these and see what they do. I do like the fact that as opposed to older versions of Avid, now you can actually see what these fonts look like. So if I want to use one of these, I can select something and see it show up like that. When I'm done making my edits, I can close this and go back to my editing, and you can see this is in here. Something that was noted in the video that I want to point out is if I want to actually store one of these, I could take this window, my effect editor, while that was up, and if that closes, so if this accidentally gets closed and I want to bring it up, I can go under my tools, effect editor, and it's right there. I could go into a bin, and let's say I want to keep this particular title. I can take this effect and just drag it into the bin, and it shows up as a clip, and then it's available to use later. And I would give it a different name. But now this shows up just like any other clip, so I have ready access to it. And if I want to use it somewhere else in my project, now all I have to do is I could take it and literally just drag it into a timeline somewhere, and there it is. What you might notice is I just dragged it over my entire timeline, and yet as I scroll through here, I'm not seeing that title. The reason for this doesn't have anything to do with the title not being correct. It actually has to do with my selectors over here. You may recall we talked about, you can see the titler tool, by the way, has this little T plus icon. Anytime I see this little pink or magenta rectangle, that tells me there's an effect on something. So you can see here there's some effects on these. That's actually a resize is the plus there. This is color correction. Anyhow, so it tells me there's effects on these. Over here, next to my track on-off selectors, then I have my sync locks. I have these things over here which are telling me what tracks are visible. For the audio tracks, it's sort of straightforward. I can solo a track, notice that mutes the other track, or mute a track, or have nothing, or I could have both these soloed or whatever. And that's pretty straightforward. If a track's soloed, it's turned on. If it's muted, it's turned off. On the video side, it's not so straightforward because I can only select one of these at a time. You'll notice when I move from one to the other, it doesn't allow me to turn on multiple things like I could here, where I could solo the tracks or mute them both, or I have no idea why I do this. I can solo and mute them all. What this does is it tells me the highest track it's going to look at, the highest number. So if this is right here, which is where it was, it's saying the highest track it's going to look at is V2. So anything on V2 and V1 it's going to handle. And so as it goes through here, I'm actually seeing video on V1. I'm seeing a color correction effect on V2 that's affecting V1. And if I go up to V3, that's when I can see my title over it. That's why it wasn't showing up. This is a common mistake you might make at first is I have my title in there. Why isn't it showing up? And just double check that whatever layer it's on, you have that layer or a layer above it turned on here. I can actually turn off all these if I don't want to see any video too, just FYI. That's a mistake that happens to everyone once and you're like, oh my God, I lost all my video. And then you realize this and then you know how to solve that for the future. So I got that title in. One last thing I want to show is, let's say I put a title in or any kind of effect and I decide I don't want it. There's a little universal no sign here. I always call it the Ghostbusters or no smoking sign, but you know what it means, the circle with the line through it. And I'm just going to click on that and that will remove effect. And in this case, it removed both these effects because I have both these tracks active. If I turn off these other tracks and just have V3 available, it's just going to take off the effect on V3 because as we know in Avid, any track that's not active here, whatever I do is not going to have any impact on it. So this one is still here, but the one that was over all these other clips is now gone. I could, of course, move this if I wanted it over something later. So I could move this up here and we can see the title come in and go away. So it behaves just like another clip. And those are the main things I wanted to add. I thought the Avid tutorial was pretty straightforward, but the things about the track selectors here and being able to remove effect and also just knowing what this thing is when you see the effect editor pop up, that is normal. So if I'm over here and I'm just working and editing and I want to make a title, as soon as I hit this button, in addition to this Avid Titler menu, you'll see that effect editor is always going to also pop up. And if I want that to go away, I can just go back into my regular editing and you can see it just disappears. So that's the supplemental. Hopefully between this and the Avid Titler tutorial put out by Avid itself, you've got a pretty clear understanding of how to make a title.